Hello, my name is Bill Brandt. I'm the Director of Strategic Integration at ASU Lightworks. Lightworks is an initiative at Arizona State University that works on energy and decarbonization of the energy system issues. Today's topic is smart systems, people, and the transition to decarbonize energy. And my colleagues will be talking about different frameworks for smart systems to meaningfully accelerate decarbonization at scale while enhancing the value of supply chains. The ASU panelists will talk about how we can bring parties together to co-create ways to address the challenges of risk, data needs, user confidence, insecurity, and the misuse of information. So to start the panel, I'm going to pass the baton to Cheryl Heller, and I'll let her introduce herself and her discussion topic.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everyone. I am the Director of Design Integration at ASU, which is a joint position between the Schools of Engineering, Business, and Design, and I'm a Professor of Practice in Innovation Design. To paraphrase the Nobel laureate economist Herbert Simon, he said that design is a process for devising courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. That, I think, is an appropriate characterization of the transition from to decarbonize energy. But in this case, the difference between the current and the preferred situation is an enormous and an enormously complex and interconnected one. Design methodologies are being used more frequently and in more places to take on complex, seemingly intractable problems, because it's the perfect approach in situations where the challenges won't succumb to analysis. In this case, for example, we may be able to measure the extent of the problem regarding climate change, and we may have data on the target we want to get to, but we have no idea what inventions or interventions will create a tipping point of requisite parts of the system that are required to change it. For one thing, human mental models and behavior are the big unknown. And I think it's safe to say we're witnessing evidence in this country of how ineffectual logic or facts can be in changing people's minds and behavior. So design is valuable when we know the outcome we want, but don't know the steps or the points of intervention that will get us there. When plans don't work because the dynamics of technology and culture are in flux, and when the messiness of human behavior can't be easily penetrated or predicted. So any organization of any size is a complex system. New technologies aren't alone enough to change a culture or to change the way people think. So this collaborative creative process works because it brings transdisciplinary teams together. It incites new learning about each other. It gives people tools to collaborate and to create processes to help push past the expected solutions. And the result is that it changes people in the process. It opens their minds to each other. It teaches them resourcefulness and gives them a sense of aligned goals and agency.
Thanks, Cheryl. I really appreciate that. And it's really great to realize that we can open our minds to each other, and collectively we have the ability to sort of create a new future. That's what keeps me going in making things happen. So what I'd like to do is ask Todd Taylor to talk a little bit about what are the tools or the new technologies that are available that we might be looking at when we start thinking about how we design collective collaboration, Todd, if you want to introduce yourself and then talk briefly about, the tools that are available to us.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Hello, everybody. I'm Todd Taylor. I'm a researcher and lecturer at Arizona State University in the Thunderbird School of Global Management, and have the pleasure of teaching classes in supply chain and other technology classes, and working on a variety of research topics. One of the topics I've been working on for the past several years has been blockchain and artificial intelligence technologies. And what we're able to do with some of these technologies today is really address one of what we think is one of the main missing links in this whole equation of trying to measure and quantify carbon emitted and carbon sequestered. it's easy enough to measure carbon emitted or greenhouse gas emissions at the smokestack or the point of emissions. But on the sequestration side and across different landscapes and different parcels of land, it's difficult to measure carbon emitted and carbon or greenhouse gas sequestered. So one of the things we've been working on is a platform, a trusted platform that would enable the capture of information from various sources, sensors, devices, and individuals and corporations, and then to be able to improve the algorithms over time that allow us to take soil samples, take foliage on top of the ground, take sensor data, flex tower data, other types of satellite data, and with the artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, be able to reach accurate quantification of carbon sequestered or emitted. Doing so on a blockchain platform gives you an amend-only record of what has transpired, which naturally increases confidence and trust in the given record and in the data of that record, especially when you have device-to-device connectivity or machine-to-machine connectivity without any human intervention and subsequent bias. So we're really hopeful about the capabilities that are coming available, and the capabilities that we're seeing, the application of the data that we're seeing to then increase some of this quantification and measurement that is so sorely missing. Once you have quantification, then credits can be assigned, parties can be held accountable appropriately and properly, and exchange can be made in an economy or on a transaction platform where everybody has confidence to thusly transact. So we're really excited about the opportunity and the progress that's being made in this area, and look forward to the discussion. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Todd. And it's great to know that we've got some of these new digital technologies that can help us do some of these complicated things. And certainly, when you think about complex natural capital systems, the ability to understand the interactions is really important. And we can now use blockchain and some of the other things you've talked about to improve our capability of being able to do this. But it's like all things, when you create a technology and you give it to people, then the question is, so what happens? And Andrew Maynard, who studies risk at ASU, is going to talk a little bit about trust and risk and what consumers can expect. Andrew.
Great. Thanks very much, Bill. And I must confess, what I really want to say is what Cheryl said here. So my name's Andrew Maynard. I'm an associate dean in the ASU College of Global Futures. But most of my work over the last 15 to 20 years has been at the nexus between technology, society, and the future, and trying to work out how we move towards better futures within this really complex system. And as Cheryl intimated, complexity is key here. We not only have the complexity of the planet we live on, the environments we live in, and our coupling to that, but also we have the really messy complexity of people with all our weirdnesses, all our seeming irrationalities. And the work that I'm involved with, especially around tech innovation, building a better future, recognizes that you can't just throw up your hands and say, isn't it a shame that people are irrational? Because we're actually part of the system. Instead, if you're going to move forward, you've got to understand those personal dynamics, those social dynamics. And Bill mentioned that I work on risk. We actually bring a novel approach to risk here. And it's not really risk in the conventional sense, but it's asking, how can we build value as we move to the future? And what is going to threaten that value? So now we think about risk as a threat to value. And some of the biggest threats we see are what we call orphan risks, those things that are hard to quantify, really easy to ignore, and yet they come back and bite you. And that includes things such as trust in a technology. So if we begin to put together where Cheryl was coming from with design and innovative approaches to really complex, wicked problems, and Todd's approach to how we develop new technologies to do that. In my world of risk, we ask, well, what is going to trip us up here? Where are those things like public perceptions, where even if people have got their ideas totally wrong, they still determine how they behave and they react. How about issues such as ethical behavior? What happens if we think we've got a great technology, but people are really worried about the ethics, either of how it's been developed or where it might have inbuilt biases or where it might actually disadvantage certain members of the population? And what is very clear from this work is if we're going to find really resilient solutions to very complex problems such as decarbonization, we've got to think broadly about how people behave in that system, where they create potential barriers to value creation, and how we work around those in sophisticated ways. And with that, back to you, Bill.
Oh, thanks very much, Andrew. So what I'd like to do is throw a few questions out to the panel to have a robust discussion, both from the point of view of design and technology and risks and trust. One of the things that we'd like to do is we'd like to engage everybody in how do we get to net zero carbon. What do you think are going to be the opportunities and the challenges as a team?
So I guess the first question, actually, if I start off with that, is who do we mean by everybody? Do we just mean people that have agency here? Do we mean citizens? Do we really mean everybody, including, say, the homeless on the streets? What are the bounds of this?
So imagine that what you could do is you could use your smartphone to basically assist you in making zero carbon choices. So if we started off with saying it's not just corporates who are going to make it possible, it's not just policymakers that it's going to possible. I'm in charge because I have this red phone. Does that help with everybody?
It does. Okay, yeah. So people who are engaged that have agency, and we're pushing out the boundaries of those people that we include in that package. So yeah, then you both sort of have the intrigue and the incitement here of including more people in decision-making processes. And I'd love to hear Cheryl's response to this. But of course, you've got to persuade people to buy into this. If you're going to give people agency, they've got to opt in and they've got to understand what their role is here. And that's where things get tricky.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it makes me think of two things. One, the thing that design brings inevitably is creation of desire. There was a point in my career when I summed up everything I had learned how to do as knowing how to make people want things. And that, if you think about talk about complexity of options for behavior, right? How is it that we make a case for the importance of doing this to everybody? The other thing I think about is the way that this really works is like a living system in nature. You don't need everybody. You need a tipping point. And so there's a really important strategic series of decisions of who are the people that need to be a part of this, who are the people with the influence, who are the people with the wherewithal to actually change it, who are likely to do it, and who are likely to create evidence of its importance so that everyone else is inclined to join.
Could I just ask a question, Cheryl, about that, and actually bring Todd in as well? So I love this idea of sort of creating desire, but how important is education there? Do we need educated consumers, or do we just need to be able to persuade whoever's out there? And I want to ask Todd, because this directly brings in the technology. Do people need to know, for instance, how blockchain works?
Yeah, I don't know that they need to know the underpinnings of how blockchain and the entire system works. But similar to driving a car, you don't need to be a mechanic to drive a car, but you can still utilize the technology. One of the main technologies under this blockchain umbrella is digital identity. and just the use of encryption and public and private keys in our digital communications. So what we'll see very soon is citizenship identity, financial identity, health identity, consumer identity, all in digital forms and factors. And the management of that is going to be the responsibility of those who can appropriately exercise their free agency. And from a consumer standpoint, it has interesting ramifications on the whole energy and food cycle, where you're able to track product to specific individual. Now, all of a sudden, we can put a measurement, put a carbon footprint, involve the consumer in the circular economy, and ensure that they're able to properly dispose of packaging, dispose of unused material at the end of the product's life, et cetera, et cetera. So we're real encouraged about some of these advances around digital identity in these larger platform discussions and blockchain-enabled networks and ecosystems. We feel that the individual, the consumer, the worker, the participants, be they corporations, enterprises, farmers, individuals, whoever they may be, can participate in their respective roles and responsibilities.
So, Cheryl, you made the point that you don't need everybody, you just need a tipping point. How do you design for tipping point to ask that question? Is that a fair way to think about it?
Yeah, of course. And I think that actually is a very somewhat logical decision, right? So you map the parts of the system that are essential to changing it. What we don't know is what will change it, right? So this process is a series of experiments and emergent answers. But thinking about who needs to be bought in and aware isn't all that difficult, because you would look at the chain of events and the relationships between components of the system. But can I comment on what Todd said? I think it's really interesting that you took us right to consumer, Bill. And it's a very interesting place to start. And to come back to Andrew's question, I don't think consumers ought to need to be educated. I think they ought to be aware. But I think what they do need, and this relates to Todd's comment, they need evidence, right? They need to feel a sense of effect through their action. And so blockchain provides really interesting ways to actually give people a lens into what their acts are accomplishing and how much they're contributing, which gets to be an important incentive. I don't know if I answered your question, Bill.
That's great, because the whole idea here is that we don't know how this is all going to evolve, and we want to try to do it at scale, and we want to try to do it quickly. So when you say do it at scale and do it quickly, that sounds to me like there's some interesting risks embedded in that.
Yeah, always risks when you are faced with very rapid responses and very nonlinear feedback loops. And of course, the challenge there is, how do you build agility into the system? And I think this partially goes back to what Cheryl has been saying around design. We've got to be able to move fast, but we've got to have those feedback loops where we can see what is happening, what the consequences are, what is going wrong fast, so we can course correct incredibly fast. We typically don't do that. If you have a look at how technology evolves, especially if you're looking at hard regulation, you've got these constraints hard baked into the system, and those in themselves create risks. So then the question is, with something like decarbonization, especially when you're bringing in new technologies like blockchain, how do we bring in soft forms of regulation, soft governance, so that we can play around with the technology, we can experiment with it within certain bounds, and where things go right, we can support it. Where things go wrong, we can respond really, really fast and change direction.
That was a super, sort of set of criteria there, Andrew. So I'm feeling like I'm a race car driver and ready to go, but I
Good.
about not having too many incidents along the way. So what I just want to do is thank everybody for, a kickoff discussion, of the idea of frameworks and smart systems to meaningfully accelerate decarbonization. And, want to thank Ed Saltzberg for being our production manager in making this possible. So thank you, everybody. So Ed, did we get to about